What can one say about the Bondi terror attacks that hasn't already been said? And that hasn't already been said on so many occasions on other Islamic terrorist attacks. The fact is that this was a terror attack, an attack that aimed to terrorise people. In this instance, it was two Muslims, the father, a 50-year-old man, the father from Pakistan, I think, and his son, born in Australia, 24-year-old. The fact is it was a terror attack. It was not like the Port Arthur attack, which was basically a one-off attack, murder of people by obviously a sick individual. As far as I'm aware, that was not politically motivated, whereas this one was. This was two Islamists, two Muslim people who were focused on killing Jewish people, young, old, families, males, females. To most people in Australia, you go, why do they do that? There's no reason for that. And there isn't any reason. There's no excuse for what they did. None whatsoever. No matter who wants to make excuses, they can't make any excuses. They can talk about factors leading up to it. They can apportion blame to politicians, to whoever they want to apportion blame to. But ultimately it was two individuals, two males, who did this deed. So just remember that. They are responsible. They are responsible at the end of the day. We are all responsible for our actions. And those two men did what they did. And the whole world suffers because of that. Well, not the whole world. There's obviously people in the world who applaud them, see them as heroes. I see them as evil. I see them as doing evil things. Now, this is where it gets difficult. What do we do to stop this? Well, we have to understand why it happened. What were the circumstances that brought it about? Now, basically the circumstances that brought it about was focused on Islam and them being Muslims. We can't say, they were unhappy about certain things or this or that, or find other factors. At its core, we all suffer. We all can find factors that we suffer for, things that we're not happy with or things that we're happy with. But how many of us decide, well, okay, I'm not happy. My religion, my so-called religion, and I don't want to call Islam a religion because it's more of an ideology which controls every aspect of a follower's life. And the whole idolatry of following Muhammad and what he said and what he taught and what he wrote, I don't agree with any of that. I reject all that because it's so full of hatred and it's presenting itself as a religion. And you can't present yourself as a religion as Jesus or Buddha or any of these other people who have taught, who have preached peace, love, compassion, humanity. You can't compare Muhammad with them because I don't want to go into it here, but I mean there's so much darkness about what he preached back in the 600s, 622 I think it was, when we can say that Mohammedanism or the Quran, Islam really took off. And ever since then, over the 1400 years, it hasn't changed. It hasn't changed. I mean, one of the tenets of it is that you can say and do anything in defence or to promote Islam. You can lie, you can cheat, you can kill, because if you're engaging in jihad, you're doing it for Allah, for God. And you will go to heaven if you do these actions as part of a jihad of the sword, or whatever kind of jihad you want to pick. That's one of the basic core teachings. And you will be applauded by many people, by many Muslims for doing that. So don't get confused that this was a righteous revenge over the actions of Israel. That's another issue. The actions of Israel, the actions of the Israel government, Netanyahu, the IDF in what appears to be a genocide, killing of thousands and thousands of people, etc., etc. That's another issue. That's to be condemned in and of itself as well. It's not that we're just picking on one side here. We're not picking on Islam. We're not picking on Muslims. We're not picking on Jewish people. We're not picking on anyone. We're looking at causes. What is the cause? We're looking at responsibility and causes. As I said, those two men are responsible. And what made them do that? I don't know. But we can pull together information and factors and go, okay, well, they were both Muslim. They'd been to the Philippines, they'd had training, they'd been indoctrinated into the Muslim faith, or whatever you want to call it. I call it an ideology. So they came to believe that what they were doing was part of the teachings of Muhammad, and which is part of Islamic ideology, and that's what drove them, that what supported them in their actions. Why they would do it at this point in time, I do not know. But 3 months ago, I was as ignorant as most people in the world in regards to Islam. I thought Hamas was the legitimate government of Palestine, fighting to protect the Palestinian people. I now know that Hamas is not that. It is just a front for the covert Muslim Brotherhood, which since 1928 has had two basic goals. One is world domination, replacement of democracies, open societies with an Islamic state, and the other one is the Sharia law and the implementation of the teachings of Muhammad, which includes horrific things such as misogyny, pedophilia, torture, murder, just horrendous social and personal ways of living. And as I said earlier, part of Muhammad's teaching was that you can go out and deny all this. You can say, no, that's not wrong. We're peace loving, and you'll go to heaven because of that. But the fact is, it's a barbaric, warlike ideology which aims to kill, murder, destroy anyone who is not a follower of Muhammad's teachings. Follow me or die, basically. That's what Muhammad said. And he said that in the 620s, and it's been happening ever since. We're not talking about radical Islam, we're talking about ordinary, orthodox, basic Islam. Teaches all this. We've seen videos of the school, of the kids. They look like they're 8, 9 or 10, and they're doing a play where they're torturing, whether they've captured someone and they're going to kill them. They got the gun there, and this is kids. And then we've heard the clerics in Australia, for example, talking about murdering Jewish, murdering infidels, murdering people who aren't like them, who don't believe in them. Gay people, killing people for their right beliefs, for their sexuality, for And the way it treats women is less than men. Less than, they're basically treated like slaves. They're forced to wear covering in public. They're forced to wear burqas and that. Now, that's why a lot of Muslims don't adhere to the teachings. Apparently 75% of Muslims don't adhere to the teachings. Many of them have to because there is an Islamic State, and if they don't publicly profess allegiance to it, they could suffer death. Whereas there's about 25% of the 2 million do adhere to the teachings, do believe in it. Now that's an incredible amount of people. Now I'm not an Islamophobic, but I am fearful of the aspects of Islam that are being practiced and have been practiced for over 14 centuries, 1400 years. This isn't just happening post 9/11 or post World War II or post 1928 when the Muslim Brotherhood appeared. For example, back in 1915, on the 1st of January 1915, I recently listened to a commentator say the first Islamic terrorist action against the West took place at Broken Hill of all places, on the 1st of January 1915, when 2 Afghan Muslims, as an act of faith, and that's what they put on their final suicide note, this was an act of faith following a decree by the Caliphate of Turkey, once again, Islam, Muslim, went out, hid next to the railway line at Broken Hill and shot 100 bullets from rifles, approximately 100 or so, at the open wagons of a whole heap of families going out to a picnic at Silverton. Now, the similarities between what happened on the 1st of January 1915 and what happened on the 14th of December 2025 at Bondi are uncanny. You had people celebrating during a festive summer season. You had families, ordinary people, just going about their business, celebrating something, celebrating the new year. And all of a sudden, they're being shot at and killed. One of the people killed was the first person killed at Broken Hill was a 17-year-old girl. She was out on a date with her boyfriend, shot in the head and died next to him. Four people died on that train. Eight or so were injured, hospitalised. It was a terrorist attack. It was aiming to, for those 2 men, it was an act of faith, but it was also aiming to terrorise the Australian population because at the time, January 1915, Australia was now at war with Turkey. And there was just a couple of months later, in April of 1915, we had the Gallipoli landings and Australia and Turkish troops. Now, one of those shooters, they were both Afghans, but one of them had recently returned from Turkey where he'd been in the Turkey army. So this was, and the headlines were a war at Broken Hill. This was part of, seen in some ways as part of the war, part of World War One. But those first reports said, no, these were the Mohammedans, these were Muslim people, 2 Muslim men. As part of a jihad, as part of an act of faith, they went out and just shot innocent Australians. Now, at Bondi, we saw the 2 shooters shot people who were basically Jewish. Now, whether all those people there were Jewish or whether they were married to Jews or they were fathers and sons and daughters and brothers and relations of Jewish people or just ordinary people who happened to be on the beach, they just shot and shot and shot and killed innocent people. Now, that's the fact. Those facts do not prove, and by stating those facts, the reality of it doesn't mean we are Islamophobic. It means that we're aware of the reality. We're aware of the brutal aspect of what happened, because nobody just gets a gun and goes out and starts shooting people left, right and centre. We saw it at Port Arthur, and we see it in America every week. And very rarely, though increasingly so, is it basically the basis for it is that you've got Muslims, Islamic people of the Islam ideology drawn to do it and doing it with glee, with vigour, and being celebrated by their colleagues for doing it, going out and shooting innocent people. Now, why do they do that? Well, Muhammad taught that if you don't follow his teachings, you will die. And since 622 or 620, whatever, Islam has been seeking world domination, an international caliphate. A caliphate is where you have a state that's run by an individual male, I assume it's always a male, who will rule that country and implement Sharia law and implement all the teachings and all the elements of basic Islam. Now, in some of the early writings of Muhammad, he did say peaceful things, but in his later writings, he just didn't hold back, and it was all violent and evil and conquest and misogynistic, as I said, pedophilic. I mean, he took a 6-year-old girl and he married her at the age of 9. Part of his teachings was that men have 4 wives. They can treat women like slaves. Rape is kind of, as we've seen with these Pakistani rape gangs in Great Britain over the last 2 decades, it's almost part of their religion, part of their belief that you can rape women. There was recently a case in England where a lawyer defended 2 young men who'd recently arrived from Kuwait or somewhere. They were Muslim. They raped a young girl, and their defence was that, well, you know, that's the kind of thing we did back home and we thought we could do it here in England. They pleaded ignorance. Outrageous to think that you can treat anyone that way. So I think we need to put the whole Islamophobia thing aside and realise that in some countries, including in the Middle East, including Muslim countries, the burqa's banned. A lot of these groups such as the Muslim Brotherhood are banned. Some of these Middle Eastern countries, they officially ban some of these Muslim teachings, Islamic teachings. And we've seen recently, as a reaction to actions by Islamic people, by Muslims, as a reaction to actions, we've seen countries such as Poland, the Netherlands, and that pushing back, not accepting Islamic refugees or immigrants, whereas in other countries there's just been an open door. We've seen the whole Somalia issue in Minnesota in America, where there's been this corruption, where they've said that $8 billion worth of American money has been used for corrupt practices, including sending a lot of money back to Somalia. So not only I'm a lefty, and I think I can look on these and I can see, hang on, the left is always about human rights, personal freedoms, compassion, peace, non-violence. And frankly, we've allowed ourselves to be deceived. As I said earlier, deception is part of the teachings of Muhammad. In order to gain domination of nation states and that, you're allowed to deceive and kill and lie and cheat and do all those things because you're doing it in order to hopefully achieve domination of Islam. And these teachings include things like, we hate Jews, we hate Israel, we hate Western societies and democracies, we hate America. There's a lot of hatred speech. Now, Australia's under fire because of the fact that if you discriminate against discrimination, you can result in discrimination. And what I mean there is if you say, oh no, you can't say that because it's Islamophobic, all of a sudden you're allowing some of these really anti-Western, anti-Christian, anti-Buddhist, anti-Hindu, any sort of other peace, love and non-violence kind of spiritual belief or religion or whatever. If you allow the teachings of Muhammad to take over your society or to be allowed in your society, such as Sharia law and that, you're looking for trouble. You're gonna see events like Bondi happen. So there needs to be a pushback. Oh, but that pushback will be Islamophobia. No, it's a maintenance of your morals and values and ethics, both individually and as a nation. If you think that 9-year-old girls can be married to men and be forced to have 6 children and be part of a whole harem, if you think they can be rape in marriage is okay, if you think that gang raping, as has been happening, as Pakistani men have been practicing in the UK for the last 20 years, is okay, if you believe in misogyny, if you believe that people who were Muslim and want to opt out, if they can suffer murder, if you believe all these sorts of things, discrimination against others, against LGBTI people, against all these sorts of discriminatory practices, inhumane practices that are part of Islam, the beheadings, the cutting off arms and hands, and if you believe in that, and if you go and preach that, you come to a place like Australia, which is a democratic, open, Christian-based society. You've always also got the indigenous culture here as well, which doesn't agree with a lot of that either. If you come here, if you're welcomed into the country and you bring that horrible, awful aspects with you and start practicing them, seeking to practice them, you're no longer welcome. It's hard to say this, but you need to get rid of these people because they're like a cancer in your society. You can't have them here. You can't have people in your society who are not part of your society, who do not have the same values. And I'm not talking about they have to be evangelical Christian or Buddhist or anything. I'm just saying they have to have basic values of peace, non-violence, human rights, agree with human rights, agree to respect the rights of every individual on this planet. Health, education, welfare, a roof over their head, food, all of these sorts of things. Now, I'm leftist, but I live in a capitalist society where basically we seek to provide most people with that through capitalism and aspects of socialism, where you pay your taxes, you use that money to basically provide healthcare, provide education facilities, provide support for people who need support. And you also encourage people who don't need that support, who want to go out and make a lot of money and through capitalist procedures. That's fine. That's fine. So it's a balance there. But Islam is more aligned with Marxism, with some of the authoritarian teachings and processes of people such as Mussolini's fascists and Adolf Hitler's Nazis. That's where you see it. And you see in a lot of these Islamic countries where their economies run down. They're because they're closed and everything depends on the glorious leader, like something out of Animal Farm. The glorious leader has to decide, and if the glorious leader isn't concerned with maintaining their natural environment, sustainability, environmental sustainability, equity for everyone, make sure that everyone's got a fair wage and all those sorts of things that Western democracy seeks to implement. You can have something like Kuwait, where Tehran is, as I speak, in December of 2025, it's running out of water. The environmental damage that has been carried out since the removal of the Shah of Iran and a place like Iran, Iraq and all that, they're suffering. The economies are suffering, the people are suffering. That's why we've got these huge refugee crises, because people can't survive in some of these Islamic countries, in Africa, in the Middle East, where these caliphates and these Sharia law and that, it's just made it very hard for people to live. And where the Islamism is saying, right, young girls, young women, you've got to be married, you've got to produce a lot of babies, you've got to produce a lot of children, so that the number of Islamic people in the world on this planet increases, so that we, as part of our plan to rule the world, I think at the moment there's about 80 Islamic states in the world, and they just want to be truthful, turn every country into an Islamic state. It's as simple as that. Now, I don't, as I keep saying, I'm not an Islamophobe, but I am fearful of elements of the ideology. I don't accept that Islam is a religion. I don't accept that Muhammad's teachings come directly from God. I don't accept that all previous teachings by Jesus and the Old Testament, New Testament, Buddha, all Hindu and all of those sorts of teachings are no longer mean anything, because Muhammad's so-called writings in the Quran, he said they're the final writings. That you have to believe all of that. Everything else is irrelevant. And what I said is the final word. So all you Mormons, all you Christians and that, if you want to follow your beliefs, well, you're doing the wrong thing by God, by Allah. You're infidels. You will suffer as a result of that, because you don't believe what I've told you. Now, it's not narcissistic, it's egoist, it's just plain wrong. Plain wrong. So I don't think there's any doubt about that. And the fact that the vast majority of the world hasn't even hadn't done a deep dive into what Islam is all about, that's one of the reasons that all of a sudden things are happening and we're waking up and we're saying, why is this happening? Why are these people doing this? And those shooters, whether it's Broken Hill in 1915 or Bondi Beach in 2025, they're doing it as an act of faith, part of a jihad of the sword, part of their so-called religion, part of a holy war to dominate the world. Now, I don't agree with that. I don't support that at all. I don't support people just coming around killing people in the name of Allah, in the name of God, shooting innocent people. How can anyone condone that? Okay, if we don't believe that, if we don't support it, what do we do about it? Do we just say, oh no, we're not going to do anything because we might be called Islamophobic, and we don't want that? Well, we can't do that. That's been what a lot of Western society has done for the last 20 years. Oh no, we don't want to be Islamophobic. Well, there has to be another word for what we need to do. We need to protect our communities. We need to protect our social integrity. We need to protect our cultures, whether it's protect the Australian Aboriginal Indigenous culture, protect the culture that's been here, the basic British culture that's been planted here since 1788. I've always supported multiculturalism, but I haven't supported, and I've always been wary of the word assimilation, because I think when the British came here and said, no, you Aboriginal people, you have to assimilate, you have to become just like us, I didn't support that. I think Aboriginal culture, Aboriginal civilization is a different civilization to the British, and has its values and integrity, and should maintain as much independence and as much of its uniqueness as possible. And the British culture, I'm British. My family's been in Australia since 1835, which is a long time, nearly 200 years. So I think that, and places around the world, in Europe, the Polish people, the Dutch are saying, no, hang on, we want to maintain our culture. If we're going, therefore, be like in America, the Indians want to maintain their culture, the Americans want to maintain their distinctive culture. So now people are starting to say, politicians and people, the general public and people in high level, saying, look, if we're going to welcome refugees and immigrants into our country, they've got to understand they have to abide by the basic tenets of our culture. If they want to bring their jihadist Islamist views or any other foreign kind of views which are at odds with Western democracy and the views of the country they're coming into, well, they should either be stopped at the door, or if they do carry out activities that are in opposition to those values and basic tenets of the society they've come into, well, they need to be kicked out. They need to be sent back to where they came from, which is a term that I hate using, but it's been used by the right for a long time now, and it's going to start to be being used. It is being used by the left, for example, in Holland, in the Netherlands, where they've said, no, this issue is not just a right-wing or left-wing issue. This is a cultural issue. This is a cultural issue. If you want to turn Australia into a Islamic state, well, sure, let in 10 million refugees from Africa and Middle East and Asia and Pakistan and all that. Let them take over their country. I mean, let them put mosques on every corner. Let them bring Sharia law in. But no, we don't want to do that. I don't think any ordinary Australian would want to do that, because that would mean all of a sudden women are second-class citizens. We've seen in Afghanistan the Islamists over there, the Muslims over there, have stopped women being educated. You know, they force them to wear burqa, to cover them whole self up. Now, you know, that's, I mean, we know they've got to get vitamin D. That's not healthy. And you come to a country and all of a sudden, we've recently had a council in Victoria ban people from using one of their public pools during certain hours because Muslims are offended by the clothes, the beachwear, the swimwear that normal Australians, other Australians wear when they go down the beach. Bikinis, the budgie smugglers, that. So all of a sudden, ordinary people in that council area can't use the pool because it's basically only for Muslims who are, the women are usually fully covered when they go to the beach. Is that okay? I don't think that's okay. I think it should be an open, free society in all those ways. You can't just keep saying, oh, okay, we'll accommodate them in this way and that way. We'll let them have the marriage of young girls. We'll let them have rape in marriage and things like that. We'll let them not be allowed to have to wear full covering in public or not even be seen in public. I mean, how often do we see public Islamic events and often it's all men. It's all about men. And haven't we in our Western society since the 1960s been trying to raise the status of women? Because we've recognised we did that, during the 20th century, we treated them just as less than we should have treated them. We're treating women more as equals. That's the way it should be. So to bring in a whole heap of people who don't believe that women are as equal. Now, you might say, oh no, everything you're saying is not true about Islam. Well, everything I'm saying is true about Islam. There's so many quotes about if you try to opt out, you will die. You can suffer death. There's so many quotes in the Quran and subsequent teachings, and we've seen on videos of imams and others making statements. And because of all this, we have been deceived. I have been deceived. When the 7th of October 2023 invasion of Israel by a group of not just Hamas but other Islamic people into Israel resulted in the killing, the slaughter, the torture of more than 1,200, I think it was about 1,200 or more Israeli peoples, and their kidnapping and all of this sort of thing. Frankly, I just thought, well, Israel's been, and this was before Israel had taken the actions that they've done, which we've called genocide, and which there's been so much protests in Australia because they've almost ignored what happened on the 7th of October. I didn't really know. I still don't know. I've never seen any footage. I'm very much unaware of what happened on the 7th of October. But I now realise that our media was so was hiding all that. The media hides so much. And even now, the government say, oh no, we can't show people this, we can't show people that. So all this footage of the Bondi thing that's being shown, of people lying there after they're being shot, of the shooters shooting, this is coming out because of social media. It's not coming out because the media necessarily wants it. The media doesn't want us to know when someone commits suicide or when someone is shot. It doesn't want to show people much. And because it censors so much of the reality of the barbarity of life, a lot of this has no impact upon us. We just go about our life. We don't realise that. And we see this man with this huge gun, and we can hear all the gunfire for half an hour or so. I mean, no one stopped. It just kept going on and on and on for half an hour. Where are the police? Where are all those troops and all those armoured vans you see when people are out protesting, water cannon and all that? Where were all those people? Why weren't they there within 10 minutes? Where were the helicopters? Why couldn't the Australian Army, Air Force, whatever, use some of those high energy weapons to just focus them on that bridge and knock those two gunmen out just like that? They can do that. They have the technology, but none of that happened. And people were just filming, and that's why we now know what's going on. So just to conclude, I think Australia needs to take action. It needs to get rid of people who are sprouting hatred. And that's so easy. You know, there's so many of those imams and so many supporters of Islam. They need to take the guns away. If people are promoting violence, promoting against certain races, if they're being racist, forget about the whole Islamophobia thing. We need to clean up Islam in Australia, clean it up, and put in place some sort of rules and regulations so that Islam can be seen as just a religion, just a spiritual practice, not some sort of misogynistic, barbaric, brutal, warlike ideology. And if it can't be done, we'll ban Islam. Ban it. Just as the burqa's been banned, just as pedophilia is not accepted, just as all the all these treatments, beheadings and torture and all these other things that are practiced. There's so many aspects of Islam that are just not acceptable to modern Western society like ours. Do we have to put up with that? Well, apparently we do. Because if we reject that, we're called Islamophobic. And we've seen in England where people are being put in jail just for uttering opposition to some of the negative aspects of Islam. They're put in jail. Whereas some of those Pakistani rape gangs have not suffered any sort of... I mean, it's crazy, crazy, crazy. To jail and fine and people who are speaking out because of their opposition to aspects of an ideology, they're called a phobia is placed on them. And whether it's transphobia because you believe that there's only men and women and nothing else, but you still believe that people can be what they want to be, they can present as anything they want to be, but they can't tell me that they were born a man and now they want to be a woman and they've got their updated changed birth certificate saying that they are a woman even though they were born a man. I don't have to accept that because that goes against the basic reality of science of who we are. So we've got to be more, not be stupid, not do stupid things, not follow beliefs because, oh yes, you've got to be compassionate if you don't accept that this person is a male and they want to present as a female and they want to go into women's spaces and women's toilets and dress rooms and they want to be going to the boxing ring and belt the crap out of women and take their medals and swimming and all this sort of stuff. Oh well, and you say, oh well, no, that's not nice if we don't let them do that. Well, it is. We have to not let them do that, and that's all part of why of the left and others just accommodating things that are brutal in the way that they end up playing out in Western open democratic societies. We don't have to accept any of that. We need to speak up. We need to question. We need to critically analyse and do that in public. And if someone stands up and says, no, you're completely wrong, sir or madam, well, you have a debate and you prove all the people there will and the law and the police and the authorities and the politicians and the rest of society can make a judgment, can make an assessment. If someone says, oh no, those Bondi Beach killers, they just had personal gripes, it wasn't anything to do with Islam. Or, oh no, those those two men in Broken Hill back in 1950, and they just had personal problems with some of the people in the town, and that's why they did that. No, the truth is it was a jihad, part of jihad. It was part of their faith, part of their beliefs, part of what Muhammad had taught the world from the 620s onwards. And it was part of, it's not going to go away, it's getting worse. The number of Muslims are increasing across the world. The birth rate for Europeans and white people is basically about 1.1 or 1.5, whereas for Islamic society it's around about 6. So this is part of a long game by Islam to rule the world, to destroy Western societies, to destroy openness, accountability, peace, love, non-violence, all those things. And that's what we have to stop. We have to stop that. And when we stop that, we can welcome people into our societies, and they will clearly understand what we stand for. And if they are to be welcomed by us, they need to obey the laws, obey the rules, and not bring hatred into our world.